camera today. Just that if I'm going to stand in the middle of the church today. Just have to adjust the camera so I don't disappear. Not that I'm too concerned about being in Hollywood or anything, but it seems like you're working very hard. So we'll just go right over here. We'll just put this up a little bit, John, if you can. Sacrifice seems to be the word that is on the minds of many, many of us, not all of us, in this season of remembrance. And so it was very timely that this week our World Religions study group looked at a lecture that was all about what does sacrifice mean in the great religions of the world. Just timely beyond measure. Because as the lecturer pointed out, every major religion has the concept of sacrifice built into it. Maybe interprets it a little differently, this religion or that religion, but the concept of sacrifice is a global basic thought in all of religions. And it's also a central idea in most of society. We think about athletes sacrificing to go faster and faster and faster, or race car drivers practicing to drive their Formula Ones a little bit faster. Businessman that's striving to outdo the other businessman. Sacrifice comes up in all aspects of our lives. And it obviously comes up in our minds as we think about in these remembrance days, the ultimate sacrifice, those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice for us. And so I just simply want to draw on this insight of this lecture, and those who were at the lecture this week can fall asleep now, because they've already heard it. Or George, maybe you can come up and tell me if I'm on the right mark. Okay. He's got his pad of paper to check it out. Colleen was there too. So actually, maybe we'll have a test for those that were there, see if they remember. Never mind. So basically, the lecture points out three things that are true about sacrifice in society and in all the major world religions, and define and let us understand sacrifice a little bit more closely. The first idea is that sacrifice is that which involves one person or a small group of people doing something that costs them, maybe even their lives, but certainly a sacrificial giving for the sake of the wider community. A few people giving themselves away, the resources, even their safety, even their lives, for the sake of the wider community. Well, what could more perfectly describe what we recognize this week in terms of Remembrance Day? The tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Canadian soldiers, airmen, and Navy men, sailors, who went out as a few, even though they were hundreds of thousands, but in terms of their opposition and the challenges before them, they were a few going out for us, for the wider society back here in Canada and in the free world, to be willing to pay, even if necessary, the ultimate sacrifice. And doesn't that sound exactly what we read in the Passover story today? The few who placed the blood on the doorposts so that the angel of death would not touch the people of Israel. This first idea seems to also crop up in the lecture I mentioned in the very life of the earliest church. There was sacrificial giving in the very earliest days, and it was something that perhaps had not dawned on me, that it was sacrificial giving. It says in Acts chapter 4, I believe it is, that the early Christians got together, and so that no one would be put out, no one would be hungry or in need, that everyone would have their needs met. There was a sharing, a community sharing for the betterment of all. Those who had a lot gave, those who had a little gave. But in the end, no one was in want, it says in Acts chapter 4. No one was in want. This week, I had a really rich privilege to go with members of the Royal Canadian Legion to all of our nursing homes, seniors' residences in Orangeville. And one of the persons that I met told me his story, just quietly, but with tears welling up in his eyes, because he was a survivor for the raid on Dieppe, 1941, 42, around there. But he was a member of the Hamilton Light Infantry, which went into Dieppe and were decimated. And his part of it was he was a simple cook. And he was able to load a lot of Canadians. He said 1,700 Canadians were saved by his and others' efforts sacrificial efforts to get the survivors back on some landing craft and back to England. 1700 he remembers helping get out of that situation. Again, the ultimate sacrifice, being willing to give his life for those 1700 survivors and get them off the beaches of Dieppe and safely back home. That is sacrifice. And secondly, the lecturer shared with us that sacrifice is not just helping a few, helping the many, or helping the wider society, but it's also something he called expiation. I don't want to get heavy duty into theological terms, but expiation is basically doing an act out of mercy for another. Doing an act of mercy for the sake of another. Well, could anything be more perfectly in line with the Orthodox Christian beliefs of why Jesus came into this world? God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Sacrifice as expiation, doing something for mercy to allow that other person to be touched by God's mercy and God's love. That, of course, is central to the Passover experience we talked about a little bit earlier. The Jewish people believed that God, out of his mercy, passed over the firstborn of the nation of Israel as they were about to be taken out into the promised land. Judgment went against the Egyptians, who said no to all of Moses' demands to let my people go. You know the story very well. Because the Egyptians said, no, we will hold on to our captives. We will not let them go. The angel of death passed over Egypt, struck down the firstborn of Egypt, but did not strike down the firstborn of Israel because they had followed the instructions to sacrifice a Passover lamb, symbolic of God's passing over mercy to keep and preserve his people. And Passover celebration, despite all that's changed in the Jewish religion over the centuries, remains the central activity in the Jewish family and in the Jewish faith to again celebrate the Passover experience in their family. To be reminded that God, by expiation, by showing his mercy to his people, allowed his judgment to pass over them, for them to be redeemed. No concept could be closer than the meaning of Remembrance Day, as we celebrate how the ultimate sacrifice of soldiers by the thousands and tens of thousands enabled many others, us here today among them, by the gift of their merciful, sacrificial suffering and giving of themselves away for us, so that we can have the gift of mercy, peace, truth, freedom, justice. By virtue of expiation of God's mercy, granting us a way forward, a way home. We're seeing perhaps in the darkest days of that conflict, the conflicts that we remember in remembrance, that we are way through by God's mercy. One of the veterans that I met this week was a veteran of the RCAF. Again, the stories kind of begin to come forward as you share with some of these veterans. He talked about how it's his role to fly something called a Pathfinder plane, which would fly ahead of the other planes all by itself for everybody to shoot at, and drop flares to show the other bombers coming behind where they could be going. Incredible risk. One little lone plane going out into the darkness to lead the others, to make a path for them, to make basically a way of expiation, a way of mercy and grace, so that others would hopefully survive that night. Expiation, sacrifice, going forward. That man shared his understanding of expiation, mercy, some, for the sake of others. And thirdly, the lecturer in this past week shared that sacrifice is atonement. Atonement's a funny word. It breaks down quite simply, if you just say it a little bit slowly, into at one. At one. Making those who were at odds with each other, those who were enemies, at one with each other by the peace and the grace of God. Making those who were at odds with each other now to be at peace with one another. I have a definite preference towards peacekeeping, like Canadian history and historical experience. I'm a peacekeeper myself, and so I must share with you I could not be more pleased that the decision of the new federal government was to take our troops out of combat, I think making more trouble than they were perhaps helping by bombing those eastern countries. And saying instead we will focus as a government on refugee relief, bringing the promise that can be fulfilled 25,000 refugees to Canada by the end of the year. Maybe impossible, but at least it's a stab in the right direction in terms of at-one-ment sacrifice, making those who were apart, those who were enemies, those who were at odds with each other, at one, at peace. I believe we as Canadians have a role in the coming days to be an at-one-ment country. We're a country that comes together with so many people. Jane and I were just talking about where her mother was born up in Northern Ontario. Now, as little mining communities are made up of people from all over the world who came to a new land to make a new start. Because there was peace, because there was understanding, justice, we perhaps don't value nearly as much as we should. Peace making is at-one-ment making. Bringing nations and peoples across the globe into peaceful at-one-ment with each other is a goal which I think we must, as Canadians, recommit ourselves to for the betterment of all humanity, for the sake of all peoples. We need to be at one with each other, and ultimately we need to be at one with God and Creator of all people, of every race, creed, and color. The one God we serve is the God of peace and love. God who wants to be at one with us, and for us in turn to be at one with each other. Our world needs peacemaking countries, such as Canada, to retake its lead as peacemakers in our troubled, war-torn world. A world that, for the sake of us, who are at peace today, lay down their lives for us. Paid the ultimate sacrifice so that we can be at one-ment with the entire human race. And so sacrifice we share with you today, the insights of our lecture this week, is making a better world by the gifts of perhaps even ultimately sacrificial gifts. Sacrificing is expiations, doing acts of mercy to reach out and bring others into the love and mercy of our God and the love and mercy of ourselves. And sacrificing is peacemaking, at-one-ment making for the sake of those who were far from us, who now we see are our friends, as the gospel lesson makes. Jesus says we are his friends. We are invited to say that to one another all across the globe. You are not my enemy because you're Syrian, because you're this or that. You are my friend, made at one with me by the roots of peace. And so in every season, particularly in this remembrance season, may we be those that reflect a little deeper on sacrifice. The ultimate sacrifice paid for us. The ongoing sacrifice that we are challenged to make for the betterment of our world, for the betterment of our neighbor, who is our friend and all. In the words of a great hymn, till the kingdoms of this world become the kingdoms of our world. Let us pray. Gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for the privilege to gather in remembrance this day and this week, to remember all that you have given to us through your Son, the Prince of Peace, his very life, the gift of his at-one-ment making mercy toward us. And yet our world remains in a time again and again of strife, warfare, hardship. Innocent refugees suffer yet again in the corners of this world. So we would pray, you would allow us to be recommitted to the cause of your saving grace, your mercy and love, your peace building, your peace making among us, ultimately our peace with you, our God. Gracious Father, be with all gathered this week. We have special memories of those called home because of the ultimate sacrifice. Family members, loved ones, neighbors, friends, who in recent days or in past days sacrificed with the ultimate sacrifice for us. I give thanks for each of those precious folk that I met together with the Royal Canadian Legion this week. You live with stories that perhaps gnaw at them deeply within. Surround them with your peace, we pray, as they know they have done a good thing in offering themselves in service to him who is the Prince of Peace. Gracious Father, hear too our personal prayers. You know before we even speak them. And we pray for Kathy Hunt, hospital at this time. Others that we may be aware of, we need a special touch of your grace, your peace, your love. These are prayers spoken and kept quietly within our souls. We offer to you in the knowledge of your perfect will, your perfect love. In the name of him who is our Prince of Peace, in Christ Jesus.